This video is, well, this is all about perceptions. There's two types of perceptions. If we really break it down, you've got uh, sensory perceptions. Sensory perceptions are what my sight, sound, hearing, touch. When I'm driving down the road and I see a sign, I'm perceiving that I'm looking at a sign and I'm reading the message that's on there. So sensory perception is one type. We are going to talk about perception as a generalized state of being. This is more of like a cognitive perception versus a sensory perception. This is the way that we see the world. One of the more famous quotes that you guys have probably heard is that we do not see things as they are, we see things as we are. That is us in our perception. In other words, everything outside of us is a mirror to all that is inside of us. Perception is like a bridge that brings raw experiences that you're having. So maybe someone cut you off or while you were driving, or maybe someone waved to you and you were like, oh my gosh, they love me, right? These are raw experiences. And what perception does is it helps you make it mean something about you, or make it mean something about them. And the reason that we have perceptions is a part of the brain that helps the brain from getting overwhelmed, because if you observe how much stuff is actually coming in. So think about driving down a really busy road and you've got all these cars coming this way and you've got cars behind you and you've got cars in front of you, and then there's a four-way stop and there's all this information that's coming in, and the brain creates a little shortcut, which essentially we call a cognitive perception. And this perception helps us to be able to quickly recognize patterns. So if I've driven in the car before and I know I'm in the correct lane and there's all these cars, in the other lane in the southbound traffic and I'm going northbound and there's a four-way stop, this is all a pattern that I've experienced before. So therefore, we're able to recognize the pattern and not get overwhelmed by it. So it's almost like a shortcut for the brain to not just take in so much information. And that's a lot of the sensory perception. But when we're taking in information about our interactions with people, either when we get triggered or we get glimmered, that's what they say, right? The opposite of triggers is glimmers. Because you always have both. It's like such a key thing in understanding. There's always two sides. There's always opposites. So you've got a bunch of information, you've got a fight going on, or you've got a party where everyone's hugging. There's these generalized perceptions of like, oh, I belong here, or oh, I'm being rejected here. So your mind doesn't, let me read this. Imagine walking into a crowded room. Your mind does not register every single face, conversation, or detail. Instead, it perceives the space in relation to what is meaningful to you, and then perhaps scanning for familiar people that you know, or sensing whether the atmosphere feels welcoming or it feels tense. Thus, perception reduces the complexity of the situation into something that's a lot more easily manageable. Now, perceptions are constructed based on past experiences, emotions, beliefs that we have, and that we've been carrying these beliefs essentially since childhood. And some of these perceptions, again, they started out as like, oh, I might not be worth loving, and then eventually, if that is what we're exposed to, that becomes a belief that we take on. And if it's a core belief, it can't hold everything in the conscious mind. So it puts it in the subconscious mind, and then it gets habitualized. And then you don't even have to think about that belief. It's just there already loaded up. And when someone triggers you, we're always reacting to our worst case perception. Examples of perceptions, and I have this in the PDFs and in this presentation: abandoned, agitated, aloof, anxious, ashamed, betrayed, broken, burdened, cynical, defeated, disempowered, despised, misunderstood, rejected, unheard, unseen, unlovable. These are negative perceptions. That's a generalized state of being, and that can be examined. So you remember Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And what he's saying is that if we're running through with our unconscious beliefs, picking up the worst case perceptions, well, then we're going to go through life and we're just going to think that fate has happened. But the examined life is worth living. Now, what are we examining? We're examining the thing that triggered us and the perception that lens that it filtered into our mind. So we have a core belief. It's a wounded belief. I believe I'm not enough, or I'm not lovable, a gajillion of them. That got touched. And the deeper the wound, it requires a deeper connection. So the deeper the connection you have with somebody, they're the ones that are going to touch the deeper core beliefs. So if you're wondering why your partner's such an asshole and he keeps triggering you or she keeps triggering you, it's actually because you like each other so much and you're so deeply connected, and you just don't know that you have the wounds that you have, and he keeps touching that wound, and then you keep making it about his behavior, and you keep asking him to change, or you keep asking her to change, right? We want the other person to change, because if you change, then I don't have to feel this festering, blistering wound that's inside of me that I'm not even aware of. And that's okay. You're not supposed to be aware of it because it's residing in the subconscious. Again, Carl Jung, bring the unconscious parts of you up to your awareness. Otherwise, life will happen and you'll just call it fate. That's the healing process. So we don't become conscious, meaning we don't become aware by talking about all the higher light and love conscious stuff. We become conscious by becoming aware of the things we are unconscious to. Those are the pattern behaviors, the perceptions, the wounds that we're carrying, these core wounded beliefs. You have to bring that up. How do you bring that up? You go get a partner who you love and they love you, and then they trigger the shit out of you. And then you stop making it about their behavior because you start to realize, I don't see the world as it is. I see the world as I am. This is why you got to have spirituality, because this is higher consciousness. And then we have to say, like, oh, there's a big intelligent design that's actually happening here. And we'll talk about some of those in the later videos. But I think you get the concept of what the perceptions actually are. Now go through an example. Let's say you've got a child who repeatedly experiences rejection during their development stages, and then they start to perceive I'm unlovable, and they start to perceive that I'm unlovable because they cannot handle thinking my parent, who's this perfect person who loves me so perfectly, and this is where I find all of my safety and my belonging, is imperfect. It's too hard for the child's brain to make sense of, so then they just have to make sense about them. Remember magical thinking? So they start to pick up the perception that I must be unlovable, when really mom and dad probably not thinking anything remotely close to that. And but that's how the child's trying to make this make sense. Now, this perception of I'm unlovable filters through new experiences as time goes on. So now you're in baseball practice and your coach gets mad at you, and then you're just like, he doesn't love me, I'm not worth loving, I'm not good for this team, right? New experiences trigger old wounds, and then we make it about the coach is an asshole or whatever. Does this make sense? When we are meeting, you'll have your specific experiences, and then I can walk you through your specific experiences, and it becomes a little bit less esoteric and less like theoretical. We can actually just walk through the real details. But I don't have any real I got my own details, and I got a gajillion of them. But sometimes they're just like so old news to me, it's like hard for me to remember. But essentially what happens is that the perception filters new experiences, which are probably neutral interactions. So no one's meaning anything, but my perception is now going to communicate up to my brain, my prefrontal cortex, and my perception is going to tell me, oh my gosh, we're unlovable. And now my storyteller is going to come out, and it's the Stephen King, and it's like how the coach hates me so much, and didn't you see him like furrow his eyebrows, and then he like was stomping around the bay and it's all because of me and he's a bad guy. That's all just a way to take the story and try to protect ourselves, to be like, no, I am worth loving. But we do this in an unconscious way, and it creates division within our communities and within our relationships. So over time, the perception solidifies it into a core belief, shaping how we relate to other people consistently in all of our relationships. So perceptions are serving as a predictive model for our brain. They allows the mind to anticipate what's coming based on what I've experienced in the past. Remember, it's a shortcut. Doesn't mean it's accurate. That's why it can get examined. So the challenge is not to eliminate perception, but to become aware of it. You just have to become aware of, like, oh, it's me doing me again. Like, it's my ego, it's my wound, it's this wounded perception that I have. It's just doing it. How you heal it is you just become aware of it. You don't shun it. You welcome it to the dinner table, and you're like, hey, dude, at some point in time, this perception and this core belief helped me to feel safe enough to get through life. I just didn't know I had it. Core beliefs reside in the subconscious, but now I'm becoming conscious, and now I'm realizing what's actually happening in the present moment. And you invite him or her, whoever your inner self is, to the dinner table, and you give permission for it to exist, and you give compassion for it. That's how you heal it. And then your consciousness will start to shift, and then you won't have as big of reactions, and the wound will start to shift, and the core belief will start to shift. And there's this beautiful process that goes with that. So big thing is like, as they say, perception is reality, but you just have to realize that perception, if it's a wounded perception, then that is your wounded reality, and that is what is going to play out. And if that's what's familiar to us, then that's what we're always going to recreate, because the nervous system wants the familiarity instead of the unfamiliar, even if the unfamiliar is actually going to serve us much better. It's very, very hard. The body, the nervous system loves to have predictability. So that just means that it can be shifted, right? So then it goes up to the prefrontal cortex, and then this is where the story is told. This is where we start narrating all the details and experiences, and the stories that we tell ourselves are shaped by our perceptions, and then that is influencing our sense of self, because it has to tie back to that core belief. And if it's a core wounded belief or a core empowered belief, it has to be true, because that's what beliefs are, right? Beliefs need to be true, otherwise we wouldn't believe it, even if the belief is a wounded belief, or a belief that creates separation or division. We see this in organized religion. Right? We see this in business. We see this everywhere. This is just all of our core beliefs just creating the reality around us. Let's see, perception is the sculptor of our experience. It determines whether life is experienced as a struggle or an adventure, as a trap or an opportunity. And perception, the most important part, is not capital T truth. It's a reflection of where you are. So it's just showing you where I'm at. That's why we need these perceptions, and we need people in our life to glimmer us and trigger us, because it's just giving me my GPS location of where I'm at with myself. And that's what the Greeks were talking about, right? Know thyself. They're talking about knowing everything. So this video is done. Amy's in the background. I think she just brought dinner, and I will chat with you all later. Leave any comments in the box, because I would love to hear what you're thinking and how I can better help articulate these principles. And then also make sure that you go to our app and or our online learning module and get the PDF, so that you can see more of the details behind this presentation I just went through.